Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. November is almost upon us, and for me there's a readathon almost upon us as well. So let's go and check out what I'm planning to read. So first things first, with regards to the readathon, if you haven't seen previously, I am helping out with Once Upon a Readathon in November. So this is a readathon that is hosted by Hannah Blackwell, and there's a ton of co-hosts including myself, and I'm going to be one of the team captains of the Huntsmen alongside Ben from Overly Average Ben and Bryce from Shelf Centered. So come along and join the fun if you want to. I'll leave links down below for the introductory video that Hannah did for the readathon and also one that I did for the readathon as well. Now, in terms of the books that I'm going to be reading, this video is going to be a little bit of a cop-out because I'm not going to go through all of the prompts or even the steps which contain those prompts, because a readathon for a reader like me does pose a few problems. So the two key problems that I have: number one, I'm a mood reader, so it's really difficult to set my reading in advance as a really kind of solid plan. I like to have a bit more flexibility with that, and that's what I've given myself here. And the second thing, of course, is a lot of the prompts are content based, and unless you go asking a lot of questions or you're doing rereads, I guess, you don't know what content there is. You don't necessarily know whether a book is going to hit certain prompts that you want them to hit. So it is perhaps going to be a little bit hit and miss, but I'm going to list the books that I'm planning to read and some of the other titles that are on my kind of mood board for the month, and as I'm reading these books I'll have a better idea of which prompt and which step I can fit them into. So let's get into the books that I'm planning to read then, and bearing in mind that this is very much a fairy tale and retellings based readathon, there is still no requirement for you to read fairy tales or retellings. You can read what you want, and it's a case of fitting them into the prompts, which is how I work. Now, saying that, however, there are a couple of books that I wouldn't normally read that I am including for this readathon, but I thought if I'm going to do that, I'd best make sure that they are books that I do at least have an interest in reading. And the first two books on my list are definitely going to fall in that category. So number one, I have never read The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. This is a classic. I really enjoyed the movie. I watched that when I was growing up, and I've got a copy of it for my daughter to watch as well. This was, I want to say 1982, certainly around then, so it has definitely aged. The book is much older. I think it was written in the late 60s. This one very much has a fairy tale feel to it, but it is also loosely a retelling of the kind of expulsion from the Garden of Eden. It does have those kind of themes to it, which is why I'm looking to read it now, using the readathon as an excuse. The second of those titles is one which has been on our shelves for a while because it's one of my wife's books, but I've never read it, and this is Once Upon a Time in the North by Philip Pullman. This is a Golden Compass, or if you're British like me, Northern Lights title. It's just a short novella. It's only 100 or so pages. This is a lovely little copy though, this book. And this is a story of how two of the characters from that series first met. So you've got the airman, Lee Scoresby, and the armoured bear, Yorick Bernison. So this is going to be interesting. It's a long time since I read these books, but they were quite enjoyable when I did read them. Then we move on to the titles which by and large I haven't pre-fit into prompts. I'm going to do that as I'm reading them. But one of the first titles that I'm going to be reading is a review copy of a book that comes out early in November. I think it's on the 10th, but this is technically a re-release because it was originally self-published. I'm going to be reading Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. So lots of people love this. I'm not going to go too much into the story because a lot of people already have read it, but also because it's one of these titles I am going into a little bit blind. I know the vague premise. You've got a former kind of orc, I believe, barbarian type warrior, and she kind of retires and sets up the first coffee shop in this particular world. It's often described as a cozy fantasy. You've got a tagline on the cover saying it's high fantasy, low stakes. I'm intrigued. I'm definitely looking forward to trying it out and seeing if it's one that I'm going to enjoy. I'm also going to be continuing one of the titles from my recent first chapter reads video. I read the first chapter of 7 different titles that my patrons picked for me, and a couple of those I did enjoy and will be continuing. One of those that I'm planning to carry on with in November is the 13th Hour Book 1 of The Cruel Gods by Trudy Skies. This one is one of the last books standing in SPFB08 because it has, since I filmed that first chapter reads video, been selected as one of the 10 finalists for the competition. It was a very intriguing world. I'm definitely looking forward to getting into it. It's a bit different to my normal tastes because it's described, I think, as gas lamp fantasy, which is not something that I normally read. But knowing what it is going into it definitely helps when I get a book like that, and I'm looking forward to it because I did quite enjoy that opening chapter that I read. Another title that I don't know too much about, I've read the synopsis for it quite some time ago but pretty much forgotten it by now. This is one of the few remaining titles in my reading plans for 2022, and it's Beckoning of the Gate by Benjamin J. Ryan. So I've just received this right in time for reading it in November, which is why I've picked it over my other remaining title in my self-published books to read for this year. So I'm looking forward to this. I absolutely love this cover, and if you want to win a copy of this, I recently featured in my book haul video when I picked this one up that I do have a second copy from the author that I am giving away, so head over to that video. I'll link it in the top corner here in the cards. Check it out and you can win a copy of this book. I'm looking forward to reading it because it's been on my list for just about a year now since I made those reading plans, and I'm finally going to tick it off that list. I've got two titles that I'm not sure whether I'm going to get to, let alone how they fit into the prompts. One of them does tick off all of the boxes, I think, in one of the steps, so there is that as an opportunity. That one is The Fury of Fate by D.W. Ross, book 3, the third and final book in the Onyxborn Chronicle. So I read book 2, The Darkest Dusk, in October, and I just need to pick up a copy of this one and then I'll be able to read it and finish off the series. I have enjoyed this series and I'm looking forward to finishing it off. I've heard some really good things about the closing of this trilogy, so I'm keen to see if it really works for me as well. The second of the titles that I'm not sure I'll get to is another follow-up. This is T.A. Bruno's Song of Kamaria series, and I'm up to book 2, which is On the Winds of Quasars. So again, I've enjoyed what I've read in this series so far. It's a sci-fi, but it's got some very fantastical elements. It's not what I would call hard sci-fi. It was quite an enjoyable one, so I'm looking forward to, again, continuing with and eventually finishing off this series. And then the last couple of titles that I've got on my provisional plan, I think I'm going to put these two in a poll because that's one of the prompts of a readathon, to read a book that's been selected as a result of a poll. And these are two titles I'm really not sure which one to go for, not only in terms of is one better than the other in terms of readathon prompts, but just in general terms, which one am I more looking forward to, which one do I want to get to first, basically. So with these two books, I'm going to put it in a poll and let my patrons decide, but they are the last two books that I've got in my series I want to try video, so they are both book 1 in a series, and I've made them part of my reading plans for the year, so I'll do one in November and then the other one in December. So I've got The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee, book 1 in the 5 Warrior Angels, and I've got Aching God by Mike Shell, book 1 in the Iconoclasts. So both of these are sizable books, they're both trilogies. We've got all 3 books available for the Iconoclasts, and we've got book 3 of the 5 Warrior Angels ready to be released. I think that one's coming out in November, so if I do like these 2 books, I've got the rest of the series ready to go on to. So there we go, short and sweet. As I say, being a mood reader, it does make setting up a reading list for a readathon quite difficult, but part of the reason that I'm taking part in this readathon, other than to just have fun reading books and being part of the community, is to show that it is something that can work for mood readers like me as well. It definitely is something that you can do without setting yourself a very defined list of what book you're going to read before you even start the month. So I'm looking forward to Readathon overall. Do come along and join in if you're interested. As I say, the links for that are going to be down in the description box below this video. As usual, you'll also find down there all of my links, so my social media accounts and the support the channel links, including my book club Discord and my Patreon. Do come along and join us there as well if you want to. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon, but until then, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.